space for the community. So it's something that we take advantage of often, but we're very grateful for it. This evening, our topic is historical as well as contemporary, and I want to welcome you and introduce you to our two speakers this evening. Ignatius, who is currently president of Historic Stonington, among other accomplishments. He's editor-in-chief of the Harvard Business Review and has held positions with Time Magazine and the Wall Street Journal. Our second guest is Nakai Northup. He also serves on the board of directors of Historic Stonington. He's a member of the Narragansett and the Mashantucket Pequot tribes and currently serves as the manager of public programs and outreach at the Mashantucket Pequot Museum. But he's also a principal in the relatively new venture, Res Life Outdoors, where he is a harvester and steward of land and sea. And he's also an amazing chef. So I want to join me in welcoming my colleagues to this program where we're going to discuss memory and forgiveness.
All right, is the microphone working?
Yes.
First of all, thank you for being here. This is not, we do not have a building here. I'm going to mostly stay out of the way. I want to hear your words. But thank you everyone for being here. My hope with this was to, have a deep conversation about, everything, the way it was built, memory and forgiveness, the Pequot experience, and not to go narrow this time on, Pequot living structures or cuisine or something like that, to really have kind of the high, the broad conversation. We'll talk for a while, and then I would love to open up to, questions or comments from all of you. So, and also thank you for coming on this beautiful day. That is a choice we appreciate. All right, so let's do it. Let's start at the beginning. I'd love to get a sense, and probably some people in the room know that, but share with us the origin story of Pequot civilization, and and a little bit of your sense of the early history before the Europeans came.
Okay, so we have a creation story. We have our own beliefs of how our people came to be. And there are 576 plus federally recognized communities throughout North America. And we share a lot of similarities, but we also have our own unique stories and ways of life. This one is just specific to the Northeast region here, and it's of Sky Women. So we believe that we came from Sky Women, and I'm going to make like a 2-hour story into like a 3-minute story. And there was a big storm in Sky World, and we always talk whenever our oral traditions and our stories, we talk about Sky people. They're always like amazingly beautiful people. So there is this storm, and Sky Woman is going out and examining the damages and seeing what has occurred, and she comes across a big fallen tree. And where this tree has fallen, there's a big hole in Sky World. And she's curious, and she's looking down through the hole, and something catches her eye. It's Earth, but at this time, Earth was just a planet of water. There was no land on it whatsoever. So she was looking down through, and she got down on her hands and knees and got around the hole and was peeking through it and fell. And started to fall down towards Earth. And all the waterfowl, the ducks and the geese looked up and could see her glow falling from the sky, and they flew up to go help her. And so they go up and they slowly start to guide her fall down and lead her down to Earth. And a giant turtle rises from the sea. And they place her on the back of that turtle, and she calls out for help. And beavers, otters, muskrats, sturgeons, fish, whales, sharks, all different animals swim up to see how they can assist. And Sky Woman had a task. She wanted to know if anyone could swim to the bottom, if there was a bottom, if they could swim to the bottom and grab her mud, dirt, earth, and bring it back to her. And if they could do so, she could bring more life here. So the shark said, I'm the fiercest animal in the sea. There's not too many things here that mess with me. And takes a deep dive down to the bottom. He did it well too, but his fins don't work too good to grab that dirt, that mud, so he swam back up disappointed. A couple other animals gave it a shot, and there was a little muskrat on the back of the turtle. And if you guys are familiar with muskrats, they earned their name well. They smell pretty bad, so everyone looked at him, you're little, you smell funny, we don't think you can swim to the bottom. So he took a deep breath, he dove down and swam to the bottom. But muskrat, they live in rivers, they live in lakes and ponds. They're not used to swimming really deep. So the pressures of the ocean, of course, get deeper. So he took this breath and he got to the bottom and was able to grab earth in his little paw. But he didn't have enough air to get back up. And so everyone was disappointed, waiting, because they didn't see him come back up. And he floats back to the surface, and in his paw, he had earth. So Skywind took that and placed it on the turtle's back and had seeds in her medicine pouch and planted seeds there. And with that, land starts to spread. So because of that, we call North America Turtle Island. The turtle shell has then become our calendar, with there being 13 full moons in each and every year. There's 13 spaces on every turtle's back in the world, have it be a snapping turtle here in Connecticut or a sea turtle in the Caribbean. 28 spaces around the outer edge of that turtle shell, which represent the days between that lunar cycle. There's 28 days in the lunar cycle. So that has become our calendar. And that's our belief of how our people came to be. We have artifacts in Mashantucket that date back around 14,000 years. So our people have been here for a very long time. Pre-contact history is something that I really love because it's amazing, but it's also something that I always love to point out to people, that if you go far enough back in anyone's history, any people on this planet, they have lived this similar style of life with a closer relationship to land and a different sense of spirituality along with that. So seeing that, and the really important thing about pre-contact was that formation of relationship with your peers and your family, relationships with the land, the seasons, and how to survive through that. Really, the work that you do in the spring, summer, and fall gets you through the winter. The winter was hard for everyone. Today we're kind of spoiled. We don't really have tough winters, but winters were tough. So getting through that was a hard task. So some really crucial things pre-contact that helped benefit and make life easier were the domestication of corn. We say that Crow brought corn to us from the Creator's garden. We say Khitan from his garden in the southwest. And we say the Crow flew over the northeast with an ear of corn and dropped it here for us. And corn is one of the most plentiful crops, one of our biggest crops in the world to this day. And it was something that was domesticated by indigenous women for thousands of years to be able to be that huge crop that it is for us today. With that jump into horticulture, our populations boomed. If you look at around 15,000 years ago, populations, they say in all of New England, they use estimates between 250 to 500 people in all of what we know as New England today, because there wasn't a true 4 seasons like we have today. It was colder. There's no real horticulture, so they're relying on following herds of caribou, ptarmigan, things like this. So they're hunting, and with that, that's a really hard life. So communities were smaller. With corn coming into play, by the 1500s, our population was between 12 and 16,000 people, just our community. There's other large nations all around us and smaller communities all along the rivers that we have in this state. So population really blew up because of that, and then the true 4 seasons offer us so many gifts that it's incredibly hard to starve here if you take the time to build a relationship with your surroundings. So about 1550s is when the fun starts.
Yes, I'm gonna fast forward about 16,000 years. But that was great. So I want to be sensitive as I say this, but I think it's fair to say educated Americans, maybe know a couple things about the Pequot civilization. And one is that there was this, atrocious massacre in 1637, and the other that, in the 70s there was recognition of the tribe. There was the reservation where your museum is, where the casino is now. I want to come back. I want to talk about that in a second, but I want to talk about the massacre at Mystic Fort in 1637. So Captain, John Mason leads it. It's brutal. He gets an island named after him. Uncas, the Mohegan Saints who joined the colonists and attacking the Pequots, gets Uncas named after him. Talk about what is the Pequot narrative of that event, that moment?
Yeah, that is such a transitional point in our history. And it's really something that the effects still ripple into today. And even if it's, the community sense that we've come together, we've had ceremony, we've had opportunities to heal, we get to talk about these subjects, but it's still something that is rooted in pain and hurt. But it's also like, when it comes to our community, if you type in Pequot, that's most likely what you're going to see is John Underhill's woodcut of the Mystic Massacre. So our perspective is one that has taken a lot of time to come to. We still are working on building relationships to be able to have better access to the site today. There were things that occurred after, hundreds of years after that, with the statue going up in the 1800s, late 1800s, sitting there for 100 years and then being removed in the 1990s to Windsor, Connecticut today.
The statue of John Mason.
The statue of John Mason, yeah. And they put just a terrible looking pine tree there. Yeah, it's ugly. It's a place where, if you go to Mystic today, other than street signs, you're not going to see anything representative of Pequot people. And that is really like the core of our land base. That's one of the hearts of our communities. One of our main communities was there. We have Ignatius, which is along the Pequot River, close to where the naval base is today. Saybrook, Namiag, New London, Stonington. So there's all these places where there were big thriving communities. And from that event, it really transitioned. Still today, carved into stone on our Capitol building is a representation of a Pequot community being burned down. So it is old history, and it is something that we're accustomed to talking about now for so long, but it's still something that we still have more work to do there, even though it's been one of the main things we've been working on, at least from a research and historical side. In the community, and we've taken the time today to heal with pretty much every community that was involved. You can't find a Pequot person or really any Eastern Woodland people around here that aren't multiple communities. And you can't hold the actions of the people you descend from against you. So taking the time to heal and rekindle issues with the Mohegan people, with the Narragansett people, because we all come from the same.
Yeah. So I get that you can't hold the descendants responsible. On the other hand, I'll talk about my background. So my family was Armenian. Mm-hmm. The Armenians suffered, a couple of massacres and what's generally regarded as a genocide in World War I at the hands of the Turks. That's a long time ago. That is so distant from my life. But, I find it hard sometimes to be in a room with Turkish people and to be okay with it. So I like your idea that, you can't hold the descendants responsible, but, what do you do with that, with the anger and resentment that's either latent or subconscious? And, how do you channel that? How do you cope with that?
That's a really good question. There are absolutely, so we have a film at the museum called The Witness, which is a half-hour film that breaks down the 2-year war very well. And I've been working there for about 12 years now, so I've seen it probably 1,000 times. And I've been mad 1,000 times. It's still something that, triggers that response, and I can get angry. But it's hard to get positivity, it's hard to get a good result when anger is involved. It's necessary. Anger is a necessary emotion that we all need to let out, and we all need to have a safe space for this. This is a wonderful opportunity to talk about it. Because, there are definitely times where I might get angry or frustrated and feel resentful. But then if I act out that way, that's a stereotypical view of a person who looks like me. A lot of times is, I'm going to yell, I'm going to get angry, I'm going to, instead of being able to sit down and have a conversation like this. And this is really what I thrive for, and this is what I love to do. I get to be a voice for my community every day. And that's not something that I chose, it was just something that just kind of happened. And there's no bigger honor. So I get to take these moments and get to teach. I get to turn this into a conversation with wonderful people to come and listen to. But it is hard to get rid of that anger. But I haven't found a way to solve any of those really important issues with anger.
Yeah, I got you. The story of your nation is, it's a survival story. It's an incredible story. So I might get some of the numbers wrong, but I read there were about 13,000 Pequots, on the land before the Europeans arrived. So, you have these battles, you have this massacre we talked about, but there was a huge mortality rate from, introduced diseases, smallpox and other things, which, I think had brought the population down to maybe 3,000 at the time of the massacre, maybe 1,000 after that. There was a census in the early 20th century that, put the number in maybe double digits. So this is a story of incredible resilience and survival. Is that the way you think about it?
Absolutely. So your numbers are pretty good. So there were 3 major strikes of disease in the 1600s leading up to the Pequot War. And prior to European contact in the Northeast, and when you see Spain invading in Mexico, you don't see a major loss of people from disease in North America prior to European contact. And that's just due to differences in domestication of animals and lifestyles. And you can just look up like old English sewer systems and you can get the gist of why it was gross in a germ factory. So it's a lot better to go take a deuce in the woods, right? It's great, but it doesn't make sense. So they brought over lots of germs and bacteria that our bodies weren't accustomed to, had no built-up immunities to, and it affected us drastically. And to go along with that, our traditional healing methods isn't quarantine. It's come together and heal as a family. You have these big family units. Family for us isn't just mom, dad, brother, sister. I have about 5 million cousins, and every one of them is a brother or sister to me. I have cousins who, after a certain age and respect level, they're my aunts and my uncles. So you guys might hear me say, oh yeah, that's my aunt, that's my uncle, and really they're my cousin, but because of that respect, and that's just how it is in Native communities, someone older than you, a man or a woman is your aunt or your uncle. So family being so much larger, we were around each other, so that allowed that disease to spread fast. And so it took about half of our population out, so brought us to about 5,000 Pequot people, with 1,000 fighting men. The rest of the population were women, children, and elderly. And for the first year or so of the Pequot War, we didn't lose because English were still in the idea of, which they were afterwards too, of let's meet in this field tomorrow at sunrise and we'll march 50 yards from each other and yell fire. And if you're in the front line, that's a terrible spot to be. And we would say, okay, you want us to meet you in this field at sunrise. So before the sunrises, we're going to meet you in that path that you have to take on the way there. And it wasn't until the English started to get native allies did things start to change. And the very first change was the Mystic Massacre. And that was Mason, Underhill, Uncas and some of his men, Narragansets as well, and then some river communities like the Tungus and Pequot. Other communities came to help as well, and they surrounded this site. And Underhill was about 15 minutes late, and Mason had already gone in. It's crazy when you hear these stories, but there were 2 spies who came into the community, Pequot spies who came into the community about a day or so prior. And Underhill wanted them to find out where Sassacus was, because that was their plan. If you take out the highest ranking person, the rest will crumble. So they came there, and so the community was aware that there were 200 or so people marching in that direction from Narragansett Bay. And they told them that Sassacus was there in Mystic, when Sassacus was in Young Chucks. And so they left and went to go tell Mason that, we were just fishing on the Mystic River, and Sassacus was there, and he wasn't there, and they ended up sending 150 extra men to reinforce Mystic. And when Mason entered without being there, he wasn't expecting a larger force that was somewhat prepared for him to be there, and started losing to the point where they lit everything on fire. They were putting out what they call trains of gunpowder and lighting these homes up. This was May. If you look at old calendar, it was June 5th. And the homes at this time were made from bulrush and cattail mats. So if it hasn't rained for a bit, they'll get pretty dry and they'll burn pretty quick. And if these communities were harvesting whales at this time potentially, then whale oil is extremely flammable as well. And then of course with gunpowder, it shot right up. And after that point, there was a retreat. So we have tons of information about the actual attack, but there was a retreat that went to the Pequot River, or the Thames, or if you guys say the Thames, but the Pequot River. And in Mason's narratives, there's multiple times where he thanks the wind that day. He thanks the wind, the breeze that day for helping spread the fire. He also thanks it for filling the sails of his ship, because as they were getting attacked for hours on hours on this retreat, we have more musket balls found and signs of all-out attack on this retreat than we do in the fort or the village. And he gets to the Pequot River and Pequot Harbor and is thankful the wind is filling the sails because the ship was moving really fast, and it got there literally as they got to the coast where they could see out, they could see the boat coming around. It was perfect timing. So from that attack, we lost about 600 people that day. And that's men, women, children. The remainder sits at about around 1,000. But really, it's more than that. And a lot of that gets hidden, like even afterwards it gets hidden, because today there's 1,300 people enrolled within the tribal community. But that's just based off of the federal recognition laws and the community's guidelines for being an enrolled tribal member, which is you have to trace your lineage back. It's not by blood quantum. We view blood quantum as a source of like paper genocide to get rid of you. We don't care who you fall in love with. That doesn't make you or your kids any less Pequot. So you have to trace back to our base census report rolls in 1900 to be an enrolled member of the Massachusetts Pequot community. But there's large numbers of people who don't fit that criteria, are enrolled in other communities. And like I said, it's hard to point at someone today and them not be multiple communities. So just like I'm Pequot and Narragansett, I also have Wampanoag relatives, I also have Shinnecock relatives. So the communities, we don't really have family trees, we have family bushes.
Yeah, I mean, so I don't mean to make this political at all, but so people have unearthed a comment from Donald Trump, I think from the 1990s, where he's talking about, right? He's talking about the casino and the Pequot Museum. They don't look like Indians.
Yep.
You must have a lot.
Yeah, that is a common thing, because America has done a really good at really hyper-focusing on the Midwest and the West, and the Wild West, and a specific view of how an indigenous person looks. High cheekbones, maybe a big nose, might have a headdress on, might be Italian, who knows? So there's tons and tons of these stereotypical views of people, and so we get that all the time. We even get that internally with other tribal folks. There's some people who are so colonized themselves that they have this view of, we have a certain blood percentage, we do blood quantum here, you guys don't look tribal, you guys don't look Pequot, you guys don't look so on and so forth. But again, it's about a traditional life and how we always operated. You didn't even have to be Pequot for a long period of time. If the community accepted you, if you came into the community and they accepted you and you played a role within that community, there's so many adoptions historically into the tribal community. And that's something still to this day. I have adopted family. I'm not legally adopted or anything like that, but I have family who, that's another mom to me, that's another dad to me. And when I go to their communities, I have a bed to stay in. I have a warm meal. So, yeah, we don't care about people's views on us so much, and especially politicians, especially when they're angry about not getting a casino. So it's something that we're, at this point, accustomed to. We were accustomed to it then. We've heard harsher words than his. And it's something that we still are fighting to this day. Identity is a huge thing for our communities to deal with because, I went to public schools and I got teased for having long hair, looking like a girl. I have a brother, so I have 6 siblings. I'm the oldest of 6. And I always tease my brothers and my sisters because if we went out in public together, I bet you guys couldn't tell that we're brother and sister. You couldn't point it out. I have my brother Devin and my brother Fatia, and they're after my mom and dad got divorced with my stepfather Howie, and I have my dad's other children, and so I have a brother with blonde hair and blue eyes, and I have a brother with an afro. If we went out together, you wouldn't know, and that's a beautiful thing. That doesn't make them not my blood, not my family. That doesn't make him not Pequot. That doesn't make him not Narragansett. And that doesn't change that. And that's really what's important to us is the acceptance from family and friends around you. Everyone is going to have an opinion and thought, but where we come from, we don't care about that.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk about this period, in the 1970s and 80s when, suddenly there was a lot of movement toward getting federal recognition, Pequots and others. And I mean, the guy I remember, and this is a name that people my age will know, Richard Skip Hayward. Never met him, but he was born in New London. He lived in Stonington. He worked at Electric Boat. He ran a clown shack in Mystic. Then he becomes an essential figure in contemporary Pequot history. So, talk about your understanding of Hayward and how the Meshack Pequots won federal recognition.
Yeah, so we actually just had our Federal Recognition Day on Friday. That was the 41st anniversary of our federal recognition. And we had a celebration, and we have 2 homesteads on the reservation that we're restoring. One we just completed, and the other is getting finished up now. And it's Elizabeth George's house, and it is Aunt Matt. And we have a replica of Aunt Matt's at the museum as well, but her actual home is being rebuilt now. And they were really essential in our community holding a land base. And without them, other George lines coming through there as well. I come from Annie George, all the George family being raised within that house, finishing off with Elizabeth living there. They held it down for a long period of time, and they started to get up in age, and the systems around really made it hard for tribal people to make a living on reservations.
Was Elizabeth George, was she the only person living on that?
No. So her sister, Matt, was there as well, and then people started to come home. Yeah, and they put in a lot of sweat equity. They put in a lot of work together to clear land, to put in foundations, build homes. And people had gone all over the country. A lot, of course, were still local in Norwich, Westerly, and throughout. But a lot of people came home and bought into the vision, bought into trying to make it work there, because Mashantucket, they call Mashantucket the place of many rocks and red snakes. The first order sent over by the king of reserve land for the Pequot community was in Stonington. And they said, the hills of Mashantucket with a swamp looks good. And of course, like I said, we have artifacts that date there 14,000 years, so our people were able to survive for a long time, but it got hard to live there as society grew and everyday life comes into play. The chase for the American dream came along, made it harder for tribal folks, and there were overseers and all these different things. So Skip really had a vision to bring the people back together, along with my great-grandmother Phyllis Monroe, and a number of other tribal members really worked hard to make this happen. And it happened in 1983. And Reagan gets the credit for signing it, but he denied us the first time. And it was by an act of state legislation here, recognizing the community, that pushed it through into Congress for us to be federally recognized. Connecticut is a Pequot word, meaning long tidal river. Our people have such a rich history here, so it's kind of like a guarantee we were a perfect candidate for it. And that has been life-changing for our community. It has really helped revive our community. It has given us economic opportunity to be able to help our children's education, to be able to invest into culture, to restore things that were hidden from us, things that we weren't allowed to access, and really restore a safe place. Mashantucket is such a beautiful place today, and we have a thriving community, and it's continuing to grow. We have more and more houses going up on our reservation. We're getting ready to build a plaza for tribal businesses and not just focus on the big shiny one in the swamp. So it's really a beautiful time there, and all that comes from, the hard work that Skip's generation and Skip put in to make it happen. And he was a visionary with so many things within our community. And our community also had the first tribally owned pharmaceutical network. So just so many revolutionary things were being done right here, and because of that, we were able to be somewhat of something that other tribal nations could look to a blueprint for them to get that done as well.
So federal recognition, allows you to do some things that can't be done elsewhere. Connecticut, there's bingo, there's eventually the casino. I guess I have a sort of dual question. One, the casino has obviously generated an enormous amount of income for the state of Connecticut. Thank you very much for the museum that you are helping run. Is there any sense in which the casino is a negative for the Pequots? But the second part of my question is, we'll answer that, and then I have a sort of related question.
Yeah. So I always say that I was really fortunate growing up because I got to see both sides of the coin. So being from the Pequot community, having a casino, my reservation has paved roads, and it has houses with heat, and it has running water, and our electrical lines are underground, and we are attached to the generator at Foxwoods, so we very rarely run out of power. We sit on an aquifer that pumps 3 million gallons of water out a day that we're able to treat and have fresh, clean drinking water in our community. And I also come from Narragansett. And in Narragansett, we don't have a casino. We don't have a very good relationship with the state of Rhode Island. And I grew up there on dirt roads, cutting wood, stocking up a wood stove, really honing in my relationship with the land there more so. And so the casino, it's hard because there are cases where you see people internally and externally looking at you differently because your tribal community has a casino. So because my tribe has a casino, people will automatically assume that I make a ton of money, and not the case, I wish. And people will charge us more. So for instance, we just finally, and this is 15 years of making, bought about 400 acres of land that was bordering our reservation that has like traditional homesteads on it, has foundations and whatnot. They put it on the market and they were selling it for $3 million. When the tribe initially asked to purchase and was going to put in an offer, they countered back with $15 million. And we see that kind of thing all the time. So eventually we were able to get it for a reasonable price. But that idea comes in and that assumption, but the positives for me so far really weigh out the negatives. Because of that, my kids can get a great education. I was able to get most of my school paid for. We have the largest Native American museum in the world, where we can be a platform for all of Native America and share stories and hold space for others. And we also have a platform in gaming that has helped other tribal communities who, without a casino, would not be doing well. We've been able to help other communities, non-Native and Native communities, with investments in Norwich, like $12 million here to help fix. We've helped all these other communities. The slot revenue, that's our agreement with the state. We pay 25% of our slot revenue to the state of Connecticut each and every year. For exclusivity in the state on gaming, we amended that pact for Mohegan to build Mohegan Sun. And we're 32 years in now, I believe, and that's somewhere hovering around $5 million that we've paid to the state of Connecticut over 32 years. So it's been huge.
Yep. The other part of my question was, okay, so I saw the account that talked about, everything that's happening, the preservation efforts, the research that's happening, that basically as the diaspora has returned, as the Pequot diaspora has returned, this is a period of nation building. And I'm interested in, you maybe talked a little bit about it, but what are the aspirations of this concept of nation building or rebuilding?
Yeah, Mashantucket today, my generation is the first generation to know nothing else but Mashantucket, of people coming back home. So it's beautiful to see over the past, I'd say, there was a big jump when I was little, but it kind of cooled off. In the past 5 years or so, there's so many more community members involved in their culture, wanting to learn their language, which it's not an easy thing to do, wanting to come to dance class, wanting to sing, wanting to come to our traditional ceremonies, participate in museum events, all these different things. It's growing more and more, and it's helping heal us. Language is such a key, important thing. We have our language revitalization going on right now, and we, in the past 2 years, we got a full-on staff just focused on language. Our young ones are getting immersed in it every single day. There's books coming out, there's all these different things and resources. So that's a positive. On a business and economic side, the tribal community is trying to expand a little bit more away from gaming and go into more family-style resort stuff, so Great Wolf Lodge and things along those lines, which I see as somewhat beneficial, but as a whole, as a community, I see us really honing in on our spirituality and who we are as tribal folk. And that's, to me, really the most important thing, is we're starting to feel more like a community. So growing up on the reservation, I could go to any of my relatives' house and I could walk inside and no one really knocked on doors or anything like that. There was always, every relative had like a snack cabinet that the kids could raid. You knew where all the little res kids were at because they'd beat bikes in front of someone's house. And we're starting to see that more. People are, the community is building love, and there's been a lot of hardships, a lot of hard times. So really that embracing of culture that we're starting to see is a positive. And then it's election season for us right now. Our elections are in like 2 weeks. And that next generation is here. That next generation, we've had leadership who has been there for a long, long time, and this next generation I feel really excited for, because a lot of them have taken the time to be sponges, to be flies on the wall, and were raised that traditional way. We're raised around love and around family, and we're a nation, but more so we're a family. We're all one people, so that coming together is really what I'm most excited about.
So you talked a couple of times about the complexity of history and survival, and I guess I'm interested in the relationship between the Pequot tribal nation and other surviving tribes. And as you said, you're connected to a lot of them, but I assume it's complicated by history. Like these groups will fought one another at times, and by the fact that some are federally recognized, some aren't. It must feel hugely unfair to people, and you might feel guilt that your group isn't recognized, others haven't. So talk about how I was actually at one of the kind of talking circles that you host, and it got interesting because you were talking about the Pequot history, and it was a member of another tribe sort of stood up and apologized for their role in I think 1637. So it's really complicated. So talk about how is it complicated to kind of deal with descendants of other tribes?
Yeah, but also that individuality. Everyone has their own perspective, so talking to one individual, they could be more difficult to speak to, and then there's others who stand up and apologize. So navigating those relationships is really key and important. I always equate tribal, we call them sister tribes. All the local tribes are our sister tribes. And I would say it's kind of like sibling relationships, is how tribal nations feuded. It was, for the most part, territorial and coming into spaces. So I always say, my brother, he grew tall really fast. And he started to steal my clothes and wear my sneakers and stuff like that. And I might put him in a headlock, but I'm not going to kill him. I just got to maybe bite him on the ear or start down at something. And that's more so what tribal warfare was pre-contact. But there are things historically that we've seen with other communities where you might just have to love you from a distance for a little while. And there's nothing wrong with that. We have built a much better relationship with the Mohegans in the past couple of years or so. There still are some people who might feel really strongly about that, and others who are further along in that process of healing and can have meaningful conversation and not be so combative. But there are plenty of individuals who are pretty fired up about that situation. Yeah.
Well, this might sound the same thing, and after this question, I'm going to open up to audience questions. But in 2 years, we have the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, when the colonists severed their political class from Britain. What does that anniversary mean, if anything, from a Pequot perspective?
So my perspective on the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence is an interesting one. My people are identified as merciless and savages in that document. And at that time, we did not have citizenship. Indigenous folks didn't have citizenship in America until 1924. So we weren't viewed as equal at that time. We weren't viewed in the same light as everyone else. So that document, for the most part, didn't have anything written in it to benefit my people. And I think it's time that the document gets revisited in a sense, because the problems of 20 years ago are different than today. So the problems of 250 years ago are definitely a lot different. And I think it's an important document, but I also think that it hasn't done too much to benefit my people. And it definitely wasn't written for my people or with the well-being of my people in mind. And Pequot has participated in every American war up to date, even so. Definitely the Revolutionary War, Anglo George. So there's quite a bit. Simeon Simons as well, George Washington's bodyguard from Griswold. So there are tons of stories of Pequot people participating and fighting for our country. And I wouldn't say that indigenous people don't like America. There's a lot of cases where the problems come down is continuous habits of broken treaties, continuous habits of beating around the bush, and not just having conversations. A lot of times when we're included in processes, we're included at step 37 and not step 1. We're not brought to the table until it's too late. It's, our planet's screwed, maybe we should go talk to the Indians. And so taking the time to really build those relationships is key. That document is something that we actually are working on a couple exhibits. We went to I got to speak on a panel about this a couple months back at Southern. And so it's coming up. There are people reaching out to us already and wanting to have exhibits and different things, but it's something that is definitely a touchy subject in the community.
I think you know this, but historically it leads to reading of the Declaration of Independence. The Declaration of Independence on Independence Day every year. And the language is so offensive that it feels ahistoric to change it or delete it, but it is necessary before the reading to just say, there's some language that we're not proud of or we're going to, but it is there. So before I open the audience, I do want to ask, because it kind of follows up everything you're talking about. Do the Pequot Council, the leadership, feel that there need to be reparations?
That is a really good question. Again, that's gonna. I wish my Uncle Mike was here. He talked really good about that. I think that as a whole, the country should look to build relationships and not go off of your history books that people are giving you and teaching your children and having them make. They're cool. I like them, but little fan turkeys that say that they landed on an imaginary rock in Plymouth that's not there. And take the time to build relationships with these communities, understand their uniqueness within their own identities. Don't just ask them to do a land acknowledgement to check a box and do surface work with the community. Take the time to build that relationship and have something more meaningful. Reparations, we'll take some nice waterfront property with a lot of claw hogs and blue crabs on it, and that's our main thing at this point, is taking the time to reconnect with a lot of areas that, like I said, we don't have a presence in today. That would be a good step, is to have tribal lands in more of our homelands, 250 square mile radius. We're not asking for America back. We're not going to send you on a ship and kick you off and send you away. Our border patrol policies are a little looser. It's something that we have to come to accept and love and take that time to heal. These conversations are awesome. I love these conversations. I was telling Nadia that lectures are, but having the opportunity to sit down and talk with people and come together as a community is really what it's all about. And taking the time to understand, don't just do your own research, get your own primary sources, don't listen to other people's all the time, because everyone has different perspectives and views.
Yeah. All right. In that spirit, any questions? Are we running the microphone, or should we just ask people to speak loudly? I can restate the questions. Okay.
I have a teacher voice.
A teacher voice. All right, that's good. All right, we'll start here and then go here. And yes.
condescending to offer this? Why would they want this random scrap of land, etc.? But I know that there are organizations that help collect parcels, and I wonder if you could give more insight into that.
Yeah, so that's a really popular movement right now throughout Indian country. You see examples here in the Northeast. URI has given 40 acres to the Narragansett Nation to build a museum there, Tamaqua there on the campus, which is awesome. You see more examples out west, the Salmon River in the Pacific Northwest being given back to the people. And it really varies case to case because some communities might have more abilities than others to be able to have that, deal with that process of taking more land in. And once you get the land, it is a really hard process to go through the Department of Interior, to sign into trust and all this stuff. So we have pieces of land that have taken us 15 years to get into trust. So that process is hard. So I think it varies case to case, taking the time to see the tribal community's needs. If it's something that maybe you're not, in all cases, giving them land, but giving them access to harvest certain things at certain times, things along those lines. But other communities are able to take in land. It is a big movement right now, though, for sure.
Did you have, yeah, okay.
So I'm wondering if you could share with us how the Pequots were split into Mashantucket for Western and Eastern, and then what's your relationship like today, and are people working on it?
That's a really good question, Katie. Following the Pequot War, the Pequot community was split into two separate tribal communities, and it was by a portion of the community was sent to live with the Narragansetts on the east side of the Pawcatuck River, and a portion was sent to live with the Mohegans on the west side of the Pawcatuck River. And because of that, there's a western Pequot community, the Mashantucket, and there's an eastern Pequot community. Our communities today are about a mile apart from each other. Eastern Pequot community received their federal recognition in the early 2000s and had it taken away a few short years later, along with Schaghticoke up in Kent County area. And a lot of that politically, people say is due to casinos and the fear of that in the state. And today, I always tell people, if you hear me introduce myself, that you're very seldomly going to hear me say I'm Mashantucket Pequot. You're just going to hear me say that I'm Pequot, because there's truly only one Pequot people. And even Mohegan people descend from Pequot people. So there's truly only one Pequot people. And I'd say in the past couple of years, there's always been a relationship between the people really well between our communities. Not always that government-to-government relationship as there should be. But in the past couple of years, there's been plenty of things where the communities are working together. A really important one, Maggie's working on with our communities, with the Mystic Watershed Alliance. And that is a co-management partnership between multiple tribal nations and towns locally that are working hard on our watershed and our waterways. One of the important things we're working on right now is potential for dam removals for herring to be able to migrate again. And that's just one of the beautiful projects. There's a couple of really cool events. We had a nice black tie event at the museum this year for Pequot Days. We have a day called Pequot Day every year, and it's a weekend event. And it's a celebration of the fact that our people are still here. It's the survival of our people. So we get to dress nice and have a couple drinks and eat some good food. We get to play tug of war. The kids do a little bounce house for people to burn off energy. And it's always a good time. So there's those aspects of the community coming together. And yeah, there's more to come in the future for you.
I think, yeah.
Thank you for all your comments today and your perspective. My question is it kind of a comment? You mentioned that there's not a lot of recognition that the Pequots really actually lived in Mystic and that history. Out in LA, the Grua Center they, before every event, acknowledge that they're built on indigenous land.
Mm-hmm.
So they haven't been it back, but at least it's a recognition. So it'd be great to see something like that in this area as well, as a start of, appreciation and acknowledgement.
Yeah, we're actually, maybe I'm dropping a spoiler. Yeah, maybe the ideas of recognition for Pequot communities, a land acknowledgement, some signage, maybe some sort of recognition towards the Pequot community in Mystic and areas like that. Those are questions and statement. But we are working on an exhibit that will open in June, I believe, at the Mystic Museum of Art. So Pequot people are going to come take over Mystic for the summer for a little bit. And you'll see us everywhere, and we'll be singing songs really loud and paddling down the river in wooden mashuis, and having a good time and showcasing the fact that Mystic is our home as well within that exhibit. And I encourage you guys to go check that out. You didn't hear it from me though, so. Yes.
What was the reason for the Pequot work to begin with?
That's a great.
Land acquisition.
That's a really good question. It kind of had every possible outcome in 4 wars to occur. So there's money. Okay, money is a huge motivator in wars, and the beaver fur trade is where that money was coming in. People wanting a control over the beaver fur trade. I always tell people beaver fur trade is really the first gold rush of North America. People were coming here in large numbers to harvest these animals, to make fancy hats and waterproof clothing. And if we didn't change our fashion senses, we probably wouldn't have beaver today. The differences in perspectives on land is huge as well, land ownership. So when the English are arriving here, they're saying, oh, they're not utilizing this land to its fullest potential. But our perspectives on the utilization of that land, their perspective was, oh, this all needs to be clear cut, which they did to the majority of Connecticut, and it needs to be pastures and fields, and this is the best way to go about it. Where ours, we had a different perspective, and we felt we had that relationship with the land. So yes, you use the land, but you also need to give back to it and nurture it. So controlled burns were common as well. But differences in land, differences in religion were huge. So there was also, tons of propaganda going over to England of drawings and documentation of indigenous people, and they were putting out paintings and drawings of people with horns, with fangs, with tails. So when you're taking that cruise across the big pond, you're building up perspectives on the people that you haven't even met. That was huge. And it's funny, running from religious persecution to then do it over here. Yeah, that tends to happen. Trauma tends to repeat itself. So that was huge in it, and then just the disagreements in lifeways. And all of those combined led to war. And a lot of people think it was inevitable. There were plenty of opportunities, and the miscommunications and things that also contributed, with the capture of one of our sachems, and they demanded 140 plus fathoms of wampum. A fathom is a 6-foot strand of wampum beads, and we met that demand, and they shot our sachem in the back and threw him in the river and pulled up anchor and sailed away. And a couple months later, John Oldham comes downriver, and the son of that sachem retaliated and killed that captain, but he was Dutch, he wasn't English. And then the English wanted the head of that man, but that was Sassacus. And it's not a head we were going to give up. So disagreements, little petty things also tied up.
Yeah, so it's context and then
Yeah.
these things that trigger war.
Firstly, thank you so much for your perspectives and for sharing history and for your very open heart. I want to ask a little bit more about language. Can you tell us how many people actually speak the language today, and is there a school where kids can study the language, or how do you tell us a little bit?
Yeah, good question. Fluent speakers in the community right now, there aren't many within our community. I'd say 3 or 4. I can speak Pequot, but I'm not fluent. I wouldn't call myself fluent. But there's never been more resources, and it's at our fingertips. I can go on my phone right now and pull up Pequot words. I have binders of Pequot words. Back home, my children have flashcards, and there's language classes, different levels of language classes. There's beginner, there's intermediate. It's constantly our stop signs on the reservation. This is a little thing, but our stop signs on the reservation say "acquish." They don't say "stop." So we're not also going through that process. We're not trying to make it. We're not sugarcoating anything either. We're going to throw the language at you, and some of those words are long words, so it can be uncomfortable, and you don't want to mess up. But it's something that we're really persistent on, and the community is taking a hold of. So there's not many fluent speakers, but there's plenty of people who are learning and trying every day and speaking.
Has the group had to do forensic work to figure out what words were, or has there been continuity with a small number of people speaking in that same?
There's a bit of both, and it's ironic, but a lot of our words come from the Dutch and the English writing them down. They butcher them, and that's where a lot of the forensic work comes into fixing the words from phonetically, because that's not how we spoke our language, because it wasn't written down. So today, a lot of the work comes from that. So a lot of old English, Dutch documents, Key to the Language by Roger Williams, the Eliot Bible, which has 50,000 Algonquian words. We speak a Y dialect of Southern New England Algonquian. Narragansett speaks an S dialect. Wampanoag speak an N dialect. And the difference in our words are, we say mashui for dugout canoe, Wampanoag say mashoon, just to change that Y in the end. So we could communicate back and forth very easily. The Algonquian language, there's people who speak Algonquian in Canada, even in California, so it's pretty widespread, but there are tons of other unique languages, even right here in the Northeast. Things start to change up when you get into certain parts of Canada with French influence and things like that as well.
So we might have time for one or two more. Let's do two more. These two, we're a little over time, so please.
Well, I've been privileged to live most of my life in areas where Native American identity is very much part of the texture of the place. Minnesota, Western Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and now, of course, Stonington. And I was just overwhelmed by the place names. Don't be dismissive of them, the density of them, the way they frame anyone's logic moving in. It's just, I'm an anthropologist as well, so I found this a very extraordinary experience, not expected. But there's so very little in the way of actual physical identification of places. I know there's one on the south of the railroad or somewhere, a plaque. But I would hope some energy could be put into making, I mean, we all are here because we're embedded in the history and quick studies on it. But I would hope there would be some more public way, and perhaps some map rating for people who are interested, places that they should be visiting if they're in the area.
Could people do that?
No.
So, well, you want to take a stab at the...
Oh yeah, I have a really good answer.
Okay, and the question is, could we do more to kind of identify the kind of sense of
The
place?
actual places in which important events, not necessarily contact
Okay.
events, but events within the framework of the traditional society.
Yeah, so one of our projects this year is actually developing exactly what you're talking about, is a map specifically of the state, but highlighting and accurately translating it to people and letting you know what those words mean, so translating those words to English for you.
I mean, even if there's nothing there, there would be a power in going to the place where it was.
Exactly, yeah. So there are a couple of those places, highlight places that'll be on there, but we have a lot of that work, for the most part, done a lot of the language department. They've been doing research on all the names in the state and what occurred there.
Fantastic. All right. Final
Yes,
question. It's from a journalist.
Two questions, very quick. First one, very quick, concerning language. We have here in Stonington the Walla Walla Square, and there's the Walla Walla Club down at the bottom of the hill. I grew up, my grandmother used to tell me that Walla Walla is an Indian word that means resting place of the loons, which is almost too good to check, but I wanted to check and see if you had any understanding of what Walla Walla means. And the other question, I live now in the village of Noank, and it's my understanding that Noank is one of the first Native American reservations in North America, maybe the first, I don't think so, I think it was the second. And that the Pequots were there for a short time before the colonialists realized that that was a valuable piece of land and pushed them out, pushed them up to Fort Hill, and then later up to Mashantucket. But I don't know if I'm getting that quite right. So I'd love to hear your view on Pequot history now.
Thank you. The first one, I have no clue. But
I don't think it's a big
if I can have your number, and if you can record, if I can record you saying that, I can get you a response tomorrow.
True.
And then Noank is the place of our first reservation. We have 500 acres in Noank, and Mashantucket is the oldest continuously occupied reservation in North America. The first reservation was Golden Hill Pequot, and Noank is shortly right after that. And we were there for about 20 years, and they had clear-cut that land though. So the winds were harsh in the winter. It was hard to hunt and get game there. And that, after the loss of Noank, which at one point we were holding Noank and Mashantucket, about 200 acres in Mashantucket. After the loss of Noank, that was our last coastal property. And that is also another key community area for Pequot people that we've been there for thousands of years in that space. And yeah, it's something we talk about all the time. I always tease when I have young kids that I get to bring on tour at the museum. I always say, yeah, and they screwed me out of my beach house too. But sent me to the swamp. I feel like Shrek. But no, it's a beautiful place. We actually built a mashui, and its name is Nakumis, my grandmother. Another beautiful thing about our language is we don't have a word for mother, brother, sister, cousin. You have to attach it to someone else. It has to be your mother, it has to be my mother, so on and so forth. You have to be connected to a person to have it be a complete word. So with that, I forgot what the hell I was saying. But beautiful thing. Yeah. We took that machine from Mystic Seaport and we paddled it to Noank, to the first reservation. And it was a 36-footer. It turned like a Cadillac, but once it got going, it cut through the water like a knife. And that place, it always feels like home whenever we're there, for sure.
So, Nakai, I want